Hello, friends. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Elliot, and whether you are a writer, a reader, or a lover of words, I invite you to stop what you're doing and join me for a page break. I'm delighted to have author Matt Goldman with us here today on the program to talk to us about his brand new book. This is it right here. It is called Carolina Moonset. It's a fantastic book. It's one of my favorite books that I've read so far in 2022, and I know it's a book that you're going to love as well. And I'm so glad to have him here on the show to talk about it. Matt is a New York Times bestselling author. He's a playwright and an Emmy Award-winning television writer for Seinfeld, Ellen, and other television shows. His debut, Gone to Dust, has been nominated for the Seamus and Nero Awards and was a Laureate Adult Fiction Reading List selection. And he lives in Minnesota with his wife, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and whichever children happen to be around. So, Matt, welcome to Page Break. I'm so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks, Elliot. I'm happy to be here.
I wanted to ask you first, before we get into the book, you've had experience as a playwright and a television writer.
Mm-hmm.
That skill set in terms of transitioning that to writing novels, what are some of the same skills that helped you be successful there, that helped you be successful with this novel? And are a lot of the skill sets the same, or is it different when you're writing novels versus writing plays and writing for television?
Well, some of them are the same, and they're important ones. Character development, dialogue, pacing a story, arcing a story, the relationships between characters and watching those change and grow and fall apart. Those things are all the same, regardless of medium. Obviously, a novel is a more interior medium where you need to get inside the thoughts of the characters, or at least one of the characters. And I mean, you have the ability to show it in a novel, and a novel feels thin if you don't use it, I think. So that's the biggest difference. The other huge difference between television and novels is the vast majority of TV is written, at least part of it, as a group. It's the stories developed as a group. There's a whole outline process where studios and networks have to check off and before you move to the next part of the process. But with a novel, the author can just sit down and do their process, whichever way is best for them.
Interesting. That's really interesting, and
Yeah.
that's good to know. How did you get to the point where you were writing for television shows like Seinfeld and Ellen? How did you work your way up to that? What led to those opportunities to be able to do that kind of writing?
In my junior year of college at the University of Minnesota, where I was a chemistry major, I started doing stand-up comedy, and I was scared to death, as most people are. I happen to be particularly shy. Most stand-ups are introverts, and getting comfortable on stage is difficult. It was really difficult for me, but I love the writing part of it. This is in the mid 80s, early in 1983. And the one thing is I had a clean act, not because I was a prude or anything, but because I wanted to be on the Tonight Show. So I didn't want to waste my time developing any material I couldn't use on the Tonight Show. And because of that, though, the local club owners would have me open for national acts who came through, people like Dana Carvey and Roseanne Barr and Bob Saget, Dennis Miller, and Jerry Seinfeld. And that's how I met Jerry when I was 21 years old. And all of those people encouraged me to move to LA and become a television writer. And when Jerry got his show, he invited me to come work on it. So I was in the right place at the right time, and I knew the right guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I had practiced working. I mean, I had really written what's called a spec script, when you just make up your own episode of a television show. And so I had really tried hard to learn how to write those. So I was somewhat prepared. It doesn't prepare you like being on the job, but I was somewhat prepared when I was invited to work on the show. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I've heard so many writers over the years say that oftentimes getting a book deal or getting that first publishing contract was talking to the right person at the right time, just when they had a manuscript ready, or in your case, just being at the right place at the right time. And it's interesting to hear you say about comics being really introverts, because I can remember a number of years ago watching a television special about Johnny Carson,
Mhm.
and learning that he was so kind of introverted and private and kind of reclusive in his private life. But then you'd watch him on the Tonight Show and you just think, here's this guy who makes it look so easy.
Yeah,
And he
I
just
was lucky to meet him once, and he was very quiet and reserved. And it was right before the show. I met him backstage because a friend of mine was appearing on the show. And but that's very true of most stand-ups. There's an introversion there. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's really, really interesting, and a fascinating glimpse into your writing life and your career as a writer. This book is just terrific, and there's so much that I want to ask you about Carolina Moonset. But one of the things I wanted to ask you first is there's a term that kind of pops up in various chapters of your book, and it kind of connects everything together. And it's this concept of Lewy body dementia. Can you
Yes.
explain kind of what that is? And I know you have some personal family experience, I believe,
Yeah.
with that disease.
I learned about it because my father had it. And Lewy body dementia is not as common as Alzheimer's, but it is a well-known form of dementia. And I'm not an expert on it. I really wrote about my experience with my father. I do know that it often mimics two other diseases, which are Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, but it's actually one disease. And what's different about it from Alzheimer's, at least in my father, is that he lost his short-term memory. And I mean, he couldn't remember what he had for lunch. He loved sports. He couldn't follow it anymore. He couldn't remember what was happening. He couldn't talk about the weather. He couldn't talk about politics. He couldn't talk about anything, but he was a big talker and he liked to talk. So he started talking more about his childhood and about my childhood. And I started hearing stories I had never heard before. And, he suffered from it, I don't know, 10 years. And before he finally passed away of that and other complicating factors. But after he passed away, I thought it's kind of an interesting way into a story for old secrets to come up in that, and from a character who can't remember he even told the story. So yeah, but it is a known thing, and I feel good that the book's getting a really lovely response out there. And I have heard from many people who've dealt with that disease directly and feel I captured it accurately.
That's great. And
Yeah.
how that ties into your book, the story is centered around a character named Joey Green, who we see narrate the novel from a first person point of view. He's the owner of a Chicago jewelry company who goes back to Beaufort, South Carolina, to visit his father, Marshall, who is suffering from Lewy body dementia. And one of the things I loved about this book is that all of your characters are so well developed and so interconnected that I felt like I knew them. I felt like they were people I had grown up with. I felt like they were people that lived down the street from me now. Just a really great experience of characters and characterization. But one of the things I loved is in your story how patient Joey was with Marshall when he would have those moments where he couldn't remember something. He couldn't remember what Joey had told him 2 minutes ago, or he couldn't remember what someone had said to him 5 minutes ago. Moments where Joey had more than enough reason to kind of lash out and
Mhm.
get angry and frustrated, and he didn't. He just kind of said, "Yeah, Dad, it's okay." But then he also gave his dad the space to tell all of those old stories from when Joey was a kid and all those
Yeah.
embarrassing stories about things that Joey did. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if did you set that up based on kind of your personal experience with your dad? I mean, was your all's relationship that way in terms of when he would forget things, you just kind of had to be patient with him?
Yeah, especially if you've been a parent, because what happens is, the very first time it happened, I got a little frustrated with him because I didn't know. And I actually wrote that scene in the book, which doesn't spoil anything in the story. he was visiting me for my daughter's high school graduation, and we were going to it, and it was, June, and it was a rainy night, and we knew we were going to have to walk a little bit after we parked, and he kept asking if we brought umbrellas because it was going to rain. And I said, yeah, we have umbrellas. And I'm not kidding. 2 minutes later, hey, it looks like it's going to rain. Are we going to bring umbrellas? And that's when I really realized, because he lived, his personal story is different than the character of Marshall's, but my parents did retire to Beaufort, South Carolina. And in South Carolina, they pronounce it Beaufort. And in North Carolina, they pronounce it Beaufort. Same spelling. So people often get them confused. But once I realized, oh, he really can't remember, then it's like you're talking to a small child. And I mean, you don't tell a 3-year-old, you idiot, I just told you that 5 minutes ago. And it's a similar dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. There's a passage in your book that I wanted to read because it comes from early on, and it's about the painting that is called Carolina Moonset that the title comes from. And I just wanted to read a few sentences from that passage and kind of have you set the scene for us. So what's so important about this painting, and kind of how it serves as the backdrop for everything we see that happened in the story. And this is Joey talking, and he said, "My parents owned dozens of paintings by local artists, but the one in the foyer was the one that depicted night. And it's the only painting I remembered from my childhood. It showed the dark marsh and heavy brush strokes. A sprawling oak in the foreground framed an expanse of reeds. A tidal creek snaked through the reeds. The tide was out, and the creek's muddy bottom reflected the moonlight. The marsh is beautiful during the day, changing colors with the angle of the sun, but it's eerie at night. Too many secrets hiding in its vastness and in its crevices. The sea comes in and the sea goes out. Only it knows what's hidden in the marsh." Tell us a little bit about that painting and how some of those descriptions there serve as sort of backdrop and threads for the book.
Well, the painting I made up, that painting doesn't exist in real life, as far as I know. But my feelings about the marsh came from me visiting Beaufort, South Carolina, since I was a baby. My mom's side of the family is from there. And so she always spent her summers there when she was growing up, and we visited there often. And I had only lived in the Midwest my whole childhood, and to see South Carolina and the ocean and the tidal creeks and the Intracoastal Waterway and that beautiful marsh was otherworldly to me. It really, I'd never seen palm trees in any other place other than Beaufort. I'd never waded into the ocean. I'd never seen alligators. When you're a kid, that's like seeing a dinosaur if you don't grow up around it. And so it really did capture my imagination, that place. And when the tide would go out and we were little kids, we'd wade out into that muddy area left behind and see hermit crabs and fiddler crabs and all sorts of creatures. And so I just wanted to capture a little bit about that, a Midwesterner's fascination with this otherworldly place.
It reminded me a lot of Pat Conroy and how he writes about South Carolina and Beaufort and the tides, and the Prince of Tides, for example, one of my favorite books, and a book that just changed my life as a reader and as a writer. It just reminded me a lot. It was just a gorgeous passage, and I felt like I was there. I could smell it, I could feel it, I could just taste the salt water. I mean, it was just wonderful. So I'm glad to hear the background and the story on that. So basically what happens in the book, and not to give too much away, but Joey comes to Beaufort to stay with his father, Marshall, and to give his mother, Carol, a much needed break, because she's been sort of bearing the brunt of taking care of her husband as he's in this decline. And then something happens, because sort of one of the town's famous families and maybe most infamous people in Beaufort, Thomas Hammond, is murdered one night during a storm. Tell us a little bit about him. And we find out in the book too that Marshall, Joey's dad, does not like the Hammond family at all. And
Right.
he kind of lashes out at several points in the book and goes on these big diatribes about that. Who was Thomas Hammond, first of all, and why is it that Marshall does not like him?
Well, the Hammond family goes way back, pre-Civil War in Beaufort, and they have become property developers. And that's not the reason Marshall doesn't like them. I mean, he complains about that, but the real reason is that he had a personal rivalry with Thomas Hammond's older brother. And that really figures into, there are two mysteries in this book. There's something that happened 50 years ago and something that's happening in the present. And that older brother is tied to both of those. So there is a real, Marshall, who's a pretty much an intrinsically good person and has spent his life dedicating himself to helping others in need, really does have a uncharacteristic gripe and grudge with this family. Yeah. And I don't want to give too much away either. So
yeah.
if I feel like I'm dancing around, that's why.
Perfectly fine. Yeah, I wanted to ask in a way that would give us a little insight, but not give too much away. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah. But it is a deserved, Marshall has a deserved gripe against them. It's not that he just doesn't like the cut of their jib or that they're wealthy or anything like that. There's something substantial there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a point that was going to lead me to my next question about kind of these two mysteries. You have the current mystery of Thomas Hammond shot during the storm. And as you mentioned, the mystery that happened 50 years ago when Marshall was younger. As a writer, sort of balancing both of those mysteries, when you were drafting and sort of putting your story together, did you write sort of one of the mysteries or sketch out one of the mysteries first and kind of deal with that completely and then the second one? Or was it easy to kind of interweave both of those and go back and forth? How did you keep track of both of those?
Well, I don't plot. I don't make a plan. And when I started writing the book, I just had the old mystery in mind. I didn't know very much. I knew Joey was going to visit his parents and that his dad was going to say something that stirred something up. And as I don't know, I got 3 or 4 chapters into that book and I thought, I think if I just write about this old mystery, it's going to get a little sleepy. And the stakes aren't going to feel very high, finding out what happened 50 years ago without any real consequence for today. So then I kind of reworked what could happen and found a way that I hope organically ties a current mystery to the old mystery. And then once I did that, it kind of just naturally took off. And it wasn't difficult to keep them in balance because they're related. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to come back to the book in just a second, but I wanted to have our audience get a chance to get to know you a little bit better, both as a writer and as a person. So I've got a few sort of rapid fire questions that I'll ask you, and you're welcome to answer and expand upon them or just answer them, and we can move on to the next one. You already answered the first one I was going to ask you, which was, are you a plotter or a pantser? And you don't do any plotting. So
I don't. I could talk about that for 3 hours why I don't, but let's keep people entertained.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Favorite food?
Oh boy, if I had to pick one, probably pizza, because it's a lot of foods in one area. But I rarely dislike pizza. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite season of the year?
Fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite place to vacation?
Oh boy, I had New York City and coastal Maine, but yes.
Okay. What's something people get wrong or misunderstand about Minnesota?
Oh, a lot. They think Minneapolis and Indianapolis are the same place. They're very different. People clump the Midwest. They say the Midwest and they mean as if it's one place, when it's really from Pasadena, California, all the way to New Jersey for the most part, and all the way from Minnesota down to the bottom of Missouri. So I don't know. I know like if you live in the South, I'm sure you don't appreciate it when people generalize about the South, and that's true in Minnesota as well. But I think the thing that's most irritating is people will come here and they'll only go to the Mall of America, which is the worst place in Minnesota. And then they'll make their judgments based on that. This hermetically sealed monolith that you can see from space. That's what they think is Minnesota. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. I must say I've been to Minneapolis, been to the Mall of America, but been
Right.
elsewhere. And it is a great city. It really is, just terrific people, and food's great. And yeah, everybody needs to
Yeah. I really do like it here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Can you write anywhere, or is there just a certain place in your house or a certain place somewhere that you can write?
I can write anywhere. I mostly write in this room, which is my office in the house. I sit on a couch with a laptop. I'm at a desk right now, but I rarely sit here. And I sit on the couch so the dogs can hang out with me and not feel quite as left out as they are.
Fair enough. What's the last book you read?
A Perfect Spy by John le Carré. I just very late to the party, but I discovered him a couple years ago, and I'm blown away by his writing. He writes English spy novels, but they are, in my opinion, literary, and the spying part is kind of the least interesting part to me. He really writes relationships and human beings well.
Very good. What is one book you think everyone should read?
Donna Tartt's A Secret History. Donna Tartt is a literary darling. She turns out a book once every 10 years. She's written The Goldfinch, A Secret History, and I'm going to blank on the name of the third one, over the last 30 years. I like it because it's, she's a Southerner. She's from Mississippi, and but went to school in Bennington, and A Secret History takes place at a fictitious college based on Bennington in Vermont. And this character gets involved with this group of kids, and it is literary. It is also crime fiction from page one, and it's a thick book. It's probably 200,000 words or so, but I highly recommend it.
Very good. And my last question, this is going to be kind of like asking you to choose who's your favorite child, but I want to get your thought on this. If someone were to say, you could go back to Hollywood, to LA, and be the lead writer on a TV series, but you'd have to give up your novel writing career, would you do it?
No. As a matter of fact, that's not a hypothetical. That I could go back and work in television. I'm not going to say books are better than TV. I'm just going to say it's a medium that's meant more to me, and that my personality is better suited for. So I had a nice career in Hollywood, never felt I belonged. Something always felt off for me. I appreciate everything I got to do out there and the great people I got to work with, and I learned a ton, but I'm really at home as a novelist. That's where I belong. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for participating in sort of those rapid fire questions there. I really appreciate it. We'll come back to your novel for the last few minutes of our interview today. And one of the things I also loved about the story is there's a romance. Joey finds romance, and we learn that Joey has been divorced, but he finds romance when he comes back to Beaufort or Beaufort.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was single in my 40s, and whenever I'd visit my parents, they would always try to fix me up with somebody, which was hilarious. And I usually was smart enough not to bite, but I liked that situation for Joey, and he's not a private investigator. He's not a police officer. So when these mystery things come up regarding his family, I thought it would be nice if he had a partner to investigate. And so I created Leela, who's visiting her parents next door, who's also divorced. And and she's a psychologist. She's really smart. She knows a little bit about crime because she's been asked to testify in court cases as a psychologist. And 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 she has this great idea that, you know, they're kind of tricked into going on a date together by their parents. And I don't want to give too much away, but Leela has this great idea, which is, you know, we've both been divorced. We're here for a week, then we're going our separate ways. But, you know, when people go out on a first date, they always present the best side of themselves. And then once they start dating, then they get tired of doing that and their true selves come out. Wouldn't it be fun if we just told each other the worst things about ourselves right up front? And then if we want to hang out this week anymore, we can once we know that. And so they do. And I just kind of wrote that scene in one sitting, and it's a lot of people's favorite scene in the book. But it really does provide a basis for a grounded relationship by two people who just met and have a week to spend together, as far as we know. And I just wanted to, I met my wife in 2018 in February, and we got married in October of the same year.
Wow.
Which for two people who had a marriage that didn't work, that seems insane. But we were both married for a long time. I was married for 17 years, and we were both divorced for a long time. And we wanted the same thing. We wanted to find a relationship that worked. And so when we found each other, we're like, we're 50 in our 50s now. What are we waiting for? And you know, 4 years into it, we've been proven right so far. So I wanted to show how that could happen when a combination of chemistry and life experience could lead to like a fast-paced but grounded romance.
Oh, I love that. And congratulations on your marriage.
Oh, thank you.
That's wonderful. Gosh, that's great. And, you know, one of the things I loved about all of those scenes with Leela and Joey is that, and this maybe comes from Leela's background in psychology, is that she I don't want to say doesn't let him pull the wool over her eyes, but she's pretty good at figuring out kind of if something's bothering him, if he's kind of being evasive about something. And I love that because I felt like we as the reader learned more about Joey from those interactions. We got a sense of Joey from, you know, his conversations with Carol and with Marshall, and Marshall's stories about Joey growing up, all the embarrassing things he did. But when he's with Leela, we get another kind of layer or two peeled back about his character.
That's a good observation. My wife is a psychotherapist, and let me tell you, I can't get away with anything. Any little change in tone of my voice, she's on it. And I thought, if I have to suffer, so does he. So no, it really is a healthy and positive thing to have someone so in tune to those things, to be in a relationship with somebody like that. And so it works for their relationship, and it works for their, you know, very informal investigation.
Excellent. So Matt, what are you working on next?
Well, next year's book is done. It's another standalone. My first 4 books were a series. And now I am working on a book that you know, and I'm about 50,000 words into it. And I think and I'm not even halfway done. This one's going to be a little bit longer. It is it takes place in Minneapolis in 1981 in the music scene, which I was in a band in high school, and we played with some big bands, and we were 15 years old, and they had to kick us out after we played because we were too young to be in the bar. And I know that world, and I've always wanted to write about it. And I came up with a way to do it is crime fiction, but it's not a traditional murder mystery kind of thing.
Fantastic. It sounds great, and really looking forward to it. So as we finish up with our discussion here today on Page Break, if anybody wants to get in contact with you to talk to you about Carolina Moonset or any of your other books, or they just want to follow you and keep track of you and what you're up to, how can they keep in contact with you? And then where can they get copies of Carolina Moonset?
Carolina Moonset is in a lot of places now, including airport bookstores, which is nice. The bigger bookstores, many of them have it. Obviously, online places like Amazon. Amazon just picked it as one of the best mysteries of 2022 so far, which has been nice. You can, if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can order it for you and get it within a couple days. This book's pretty widely available. If you go to mattgoldman.com, my website, you can contact me through that if you'd like. You can sign up for my mailing list. I also have an author page on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but I forget to use those sometimes.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Matt Goldman has been our guest here today on Page Break. He's taken time out of his busy schedule of writing and of promoting his new fantastic book called Carolina Moonset. Matt, thanks so much for taking a page break with us today and telling us about this fantastic book that I know everybody needs to add to their to-be-read pile for late spring, early summer. You won't be disappointed. Congratulations on it. And thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Elliot. I had a nice time.
If you want to stay in contact with what's going on here on Page Break, please follow me. My social media handles are up there in the upper right-hand corner near the banner. And if you liked what you saw today and heard today, or have been following us from the beginning, please click the subscribe button, which is the red box down here at the bottom. We've got many more author interviews coming in the weeks and months ahead. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Until then, thanks for stopping by the channel. Stay well and see you someplace soon, I hope.